Hello and welcome to our Parent Council meeting. I'm Sarah Scott and I'm Chair of James Gillespies High School Parent Council. Thank you for joining us this evening. As always, can I apologise in advance for any technical issues we might have during the meeting. If you're having problems joining us or hearing us, or if one of the presenters' Wi-Fi freezes, we ask for your patience. We're using Microsoft Teams for the meeting because it's a system approved by Edinburgh Council, but it doesn't allow us to be as interactive as some other systems. The only people who can be heard are the presenters. Everyone else attending can write questions via the Q&A panel that can't be heard. I'd like to go through a few brief points before we start. We're aiming for the meeting to last about 1 hour. The meeting is being recorded and it will be put online for those who can't make it this evening. And bearing that in mind, please don't share any personal information, in particular about children, that shouldn't be shared publicly. As I said, we can only take questions via the Q&A and the mics won't work for anyone other than the presenters. The questions will be published for everyone to see by our parent moderators, so if you would like your question to stay private, please say so when you type it in. And can I ask that if you see a question on the Q&A panel that is similar to one that you want to ask, could you like that question rather than ask a repeat? That will hopefully let us get through more questions and let our presenters concentrate on the most popular ones. The questions will be gathered up at the end and posted together with the answers on the Parent Council website, so that if there's not time to deal with everything tonight, they will be dealt with after the meeting. We've seen a lot of changes in the school over the last couple of months, even in the context of a very disrupted year, with a return to remote learning for most pupils since Christmas, and another set of changes to the managing of SQA assessments. This evening we have 3 members of school staff to give an update on where we are with a variety of issues. Donald MacDonald will give us his head teacher's report and cover the issues which have been raised in advance by parents. And we will also hear from 2 of our deputy head teachers, Deirdre O'Brien, who will speak on online learning, which the school has carried out a survey on over the last few weeks, and Bob Shankland, who is dealing with SQA assessment arrangements. And at the end, there will be the opportunity for questions, as I mentioned. Before handing over to Donald MacDonald, I'd like to give a quick update on behalf of the Parent Council. The Parent Council hosted a meeting on the 2nd of February when we heard from council officers and school staff about plans to deal with the late running Darragh building refurbishment by introducing a system of teaching advanced hires through 3 periods in classroom and 2 periods through other means, including distance learning in the 2021-22 school session. The Parent Council's letter to the school following that meeting is on our website, together with papers produced by the school on the plans and a link to the recording of the meeting. In particular, we raised the strong concerns raised by parents about the effects that the failure to provide classroom accommodation could have on children who have suffered a long period of disrupted schooling and now 2 sets of abnormal SQA assessment processes, about the lack of transparency about why accommodation is not being made available and on what steps have in fact been taken to consider different accommodation options. And we also emphasised the importance of mitigation such as a digital hub if we do end up in a position next year where additional classroom accommodation is not provided, as well as our concerns at the possibility of any further slide in the timetable for the refurbishment works. Although this delay has been occasioned by COVID, the effects of it must both be managed in an appropriate way for next year and, whatever happens, not be seen by the Council as a precedent for anything that might happen in the future without proper consultation. We know that other individual parents and groups of parents and also pupils have raised these issues with both school and counsellors. We have not received a response to our letter yet, and we understand that although the letter was addressed to the school, many of the issues raised and the answers we are looking for are not within the school's control, and it will fall to the council to address them. And we have been told that a reply is being prepared at council level. The provision of school accommodation is of course entirely within the control of the council and not the school itself. Whilst awaiting that response, we will keep pursuing these points with the council and keep considering all our options. We will also continue to work with the school. We will report back to parents on the reply once we receive it and on any other significant developments. Please continue to look at our website for updates. Finally, from me, financial issues. On behalf of Rose Ingle, our Treasurer, I can report that since the last Parent Council meeting, we have paid the school a cheque for £2,428.86 for the Small Sums Award, which we reported on in December. This includes grants to many different parts of the school and includes supports for literacy and equity. You can see the report on the different projects that were covered on our website. So the balance of our current account is at the moment £1,379.07. Over Christmas and New Year, we held a fundraising appeal for the Small Sums Award, which will be made later this year. And we are pleased to have raised £624 and would like to thank everyone who made a contribution. We really appreciate your help. Unfortunately, we are quite a long way down on fundraising this year in comparison with previous years, and are also affected, like everyone is, by the fact that fundraising events have now not been held for more or less a whole year. So if you are able to support us, to support the school in this way, please do consider making a donation either via Parent Pay or at no cost to yourself by using Easy Fundraising in your online shopping. And you can find further information on this on the Parent Council website. So thank you for listening to that summary. I will hand over to Donald now for his report. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you to the Parent Council for organising tonight's meeting. Again, we're becoming accustomed to meeting in this way, but I do genuinely look forward to the day when we can meet face to face in the school library. I think there's a place for the online meetings, perhaps an evening of inclement weather and so on and so forth. But it is particularly, it is so much better to meet face to face. So let me begin then by sharing with earlier today, it was my turn to be at school as part of a senior team rota. I was really impressed with how calm everyone was and how much they were gaining from being with others. All I spoke with were happy to be in school and able to interact with friends and peers. And I have no doubt that all would agree that an education system that depends exclusively on online learning is not the ideal. It's far from ideal. As human beings, we need human interactions, and these can be many and varied. When I spoke with one member of staff, he shared with me an anecdote, and I'll share it with you. When he asked a youngster what this youngster really missed from being face to face in school, this youngster said that he missed teachers nagging at him. I've been reflecting on that as the day went on. I think it could mean so many things, and I know that keeping youngsters on task for parents who are already trying to hold down jobs and deal with a myriad of things and not being trained teachers is hugely difficult. I think youngsters have missed being in school. Teachers have, and online learning exclusively is really difficult and challenging. It's challenging for all of us. We've learned many things about ourselves over the past 11 months. Some of what we've learned we can use to make our lives or learning in a school context even better when some kind of normality arrives later this year. Mrs. O'Brien will give a brief overview of where we are at with online learning later this evening. But the feedback would indicate that we're doing much better than during the first lockdown. But you know, the skills and the knowledge, it takes a while to gain, and we are improving, and we're open to feedback as we go on. And Mrs. O'Brien will say more about that later. The First Minister's announcement earlier today served to indicate that more clarity around returning to schools will be with us next week. In many ways, this illustrates a key challenge that we've all faced over the past year. That feeling of not quite knowing what is happening next week or in 2 weeks' time has presented all of us with quite extraordinary and additional challenges. As parents, I know that you'll have done your best to support your children and dependents in these most extraordinary of circumstances. Some of you may have faced hardships with illness, employment, or losing loved ones. I want to thank you for all that you have done in working with us over the past year in particular. However tough or uncertain the road ahead appears at present, continuing to work together and staying calm will certainly help. All pupils will be feeling anxious and stressed to varying degrees. Please continue to reassure them that all will work out fine in the end. I genuinely believe that. I genuinely am sitting here tonight presenting an air of calm, I hope, but behind the scenes working very, very hard and tirelessly in addressing new and unfolding challenges, and quite unfamiliar ones too. I've been in teaching a long time. The challenges currently faced are new, and they're quite different. Many of them coming so quickly and so hard and fast at the same time. S1 may be worried that they haven't had opportunity to develop the relevant skills to be successful in S2, which provides a gateway to study of up to 8 national certificates in S3 and 4. S2 may feel that they haven't developed the skills or have all the information they need to make important course choices as they prepare for entry into S3. And S3 will feel apprehensive of going into S4, where, for example, the cancellation of exams for the last 2 years for S4, including this year, has led to greater emphasis on teacher judgment and also a different emphasis on the assessments that we would normally carry out in school. S4 are bound to feel a bit anxious about how the school will arrive at grades for them by the end of June. And that's the deadline that's set by the SQA, and Mr. Shanklin will say a bit more about this later. S5, having not sat exams in S4 or having exams this year, will also feel considerable uncertainty and anxiety about what lies in store in the next few months. And also those who are intending to take advanced hires next session, they've also indicated, as have parents, but they're feeling very anxious about our contingency plans for delivering advanced hires in response to us having a shortfall in accommodation. This was the area of focus at the recent PC meeting on the 2nd of February, so I don't propose to go into detail this evening. I do want to thank all parents and pupils who have followed up after that meeting with questions and queries. Since that meeting, Mrs. Stewart and I had an online meeting to which all S5 pupils were invited. A working group involving S5 pupils has met at least once, and a working group involving parents is pending, and that's imminent. The matter has attracted both media and political interest, so bear with me whilst I develop a detailed and informed response to all the correspondence received. I expect to respond to the Parent Council correspondence on this matter later this week. I'm waiting for a few more responses from council officers. It's taken a bit longer than normal, so apologies for that. But given the wide level of interest, I felt it merited quite a detailed response. And of course, it is going to be ongoing as this unfolds. As it stands at the moment, we as a school are planning on developing our FDL, or flexible digital learning. If in any way additional accommodation is provided, that would be a council decision, and maybe after political intervention they may take a different view. But as it stands at the moment, my role is to lead within the parameters that I have and the resources at my disposal. And I believe that the flexible digital learning approach is one that will serve us best as a whole school community. I do appreciate that there is apprehension and anxiety around that, particularly given experiences through the first lockdown and the feelings of isolation and all the negative associations there has been in working in isolation. I recognise that, and I wish it were different. I wish it were different. I wish we had a period of stability to look forward to, but we haven't. And so we will do our level best to support all of our youngsters. Turning finally to the current S6, of the 151 UCAS applications submitted through the school, 112 students pleasingly have already received at least one decision or offer. 5 students have received all of their decisions and 30 have not yet heard. So don't panic. Some universities traditionally are a bit later, and it may be a month, 6 weeks before they respond. So the vast majority of students are very positive and are now working hard to achieve their conditions. But I hope for those who have received unconditional offers, I'd want to emphasise that they should continue working, because many of our students, perhaps as many as half, changed their courses at the end of the first year of university, and it is their courses in S6, the advanced hires, which give them the additional flexibility, which may allow them to sometimes change direction completely or do something slightly different. So we're in the process then of planning for university application for next year, and any S5 pupil who is interested in applying for Oxbridge, medicine, vet med or dentistry have been directed to email Tanya Peters, and she will add them to the early applicants team page. So this work has already started, and although we're not in school, would remind and urge our S5 to keep an eye on it. Amidst all that is happening, there is information that will be coming out in preparation for next year. They'll be added then to the early applicants teams page. We also have confirmed a date with a Cambridge Link officer for the 23rd of March for an online meeting to support early applicants. All S5 pupils, as we always would do, will be supported with their UCAS applications from June this year, and parents will be kept informed and invited to an online UCAS information session in term 3. Finally then, a couple of queries that were relayed to me via the Parent Council. A query on vaccinations. and this was in relation to vaccinations which are carried out by NHS Lothian, but they are hosted, if you like, by the school. We haven't had confirmation of the next round of vaccinations that will be held in school, HPV, etc. I suspect that resources in the NHS may well be tied up with the current COVID vaccination programme, but as soon as we hear more detail about vaccinations, please be reassured that we'll let you as parents know. If there is any parent out there who has a concern about the timing of a particular vaccination, for whatever reason, be it individual circumstances, child's age, whatever, my advice would be that you contact your medical practice and speak to the GP about that particular query. We don't have access to that information. What we do is we provide a venue for NHS Lothian to work with us. We don't have any information at this stage other than that. Finally, there was a query in relation to rising roles, and that's pertinent given our challenges around accommodation next year, and in particular in relation to P7 into S1. The current P7 into S1 intake is the number is 324. So I'll just repeat that, it's 324. So our school was originally built for an intake of 200. So for a whole variety of reasons, our school roll continues to rise. The levels of interest transferring from primary into secondary continue to rise. So 324 is the number, and they are in catchment. All of those are in catchment, and specifically in a question in relation to catchment. Some 6 or 7 years ago, our S1 intake was comprised then roughly of 2/3 catchment, 1/3 non-catchment. And that's gradually changed until over the last 3 years, you really don't have the opportunity to come into Gillespies unless you're in catchment. There have been a handful who have gained entry into Gillespies being out of catchment, but that route is through the appeals process, which is a legal process, and it's a panel that is independent of Edinburgh Council. So if there are parents in the audience tonight who are seeking to enrol their child at Gillespies and you're not currently in catchment, then there is a route, but it's an appeals process and there is no certainty of gaining a place. I've been involved in certainly in excess of 200 appeals in my 9 years at Gillespies, and I would say that around 10% of these have been successful. Very few have been successful in recent years. So to reassure, as it stands at the moment, if you live in catchment and you've applied for a P7 into S1 place by the end of February of the P7 year, the council guarantees you a place at your catchment high school. That may be something that people may wish to take up with councillors, etc., moving forward, because across the city there are challenges with rising rolls across all of our schools. So that draws to a close the comments and the observations I wanted to make. We are very busy preparing for next session. The roll rising beyond 1,500, for example, is going to necessitate a management restructure. We're going to have to change the community structure of the school. We're going to have more promoted staff in the school, and the work towards that has begun. There will be limited opportunity for me to consult with parents on the naming of the school communities. Given all the rest that is going on, we're going to have to move quickly on it. So we have that settled and we're good to go really from the beginning of June, when I would hope that would be roughly the time we'd be changing timetables. There's a lot happening and that we need to do in preparation for next session. For me at this point, I think that Deirdre O'Brien is next on, and Deirdre is going to give us a brief overview of what's happening with online learning and the responses we had in our most recent survey. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Donald. Okay, good evening, everybody. It's lovely to be presenting here again, speaking about online learning and teaching. I just want to start by thanking you all for your support during the second lockdown and for all that you do to support your children learning while at home. We do know how challenging that is. We did learn a lot from last time, and we have come a long way in the years since remote learning started, but there's always still work to do. If I'm being completely honest, it's been a challenging journey at times, but immensely rewarding when we see our pupils engaging more with their learning and feeding back to us with positive comments. And we also appreciate the many positive parental comments that have come in over the past few weeks, so thank you for that. However, we do know that there's still work to be done, and we'll always review and make any necessary adjustments to try and ensure the best learning experience for pupils. The biggest challenge has definitely been finding a balance between learner progression, which we know is critical, but also ensuring that there's minimal impact on a pupil's well-being, which is equally vital. And we're very proud of our pupils for trying their best in these learning conditions, and it's so important to acknowledge that. We can never underestimate how important it is for children to see their friends, and also for peer support in a classroom, which is invaluable to learning, as we know that many children do learn best from helping each other and discussing their work. And of course, at the moment, so many are isolated and don't have that opportunities. So we, as a school, we need to find ways around this as best we can. That is going to be one of our focuses. We're still learning to adapt our online teaching practices, and although may not yet have the finished article, we are constantly reviewing our practice. I want to reassure you of that, and we are planning to try and get it right for as many of our pupils as we can. We do know that one size certainly does not fit all, and we're conscious of trying our best to meet the needs of all pupils and not just the minority. In a classroom, for example, teachers can instantly gauge when a pupil has completed work and give them extension work, or when a pupil needs a different explanation to understand a task or needs additional help. So we are continuing to develop our practice to ensure that pupils are given enough work and are challenged, but also to support pupils who find completing work at home difficult and feel overwhelmed, of which we know that there are many. So we are still learning and adapting to ensure that pupils receive meaningful experiences and feel supported in their work, but while also protecting their well-being. Our pupil voice is a powerful tool to tell us how we do, and we learned a great deal from extensive pupil feedback from a survey that I conducted in the school's return. And this data, which has been really rich, has underpinned our current online learning guidance, along also with the parent care and staff feedback, and also, of course, our national and local authority guidelines. So for now, I want to give you a brief overview of where we are with online learning, so what really has been happening, what we are currently doing just now, and what we are going to do next. And I think you'll see now on the screen our overview. Okay, so our still continues to be an absolute priority is pupil wellbeing and the health of the entire school community, especially, of course, at the moment, as the school is a hub and we do have pupils coming to school every day. And that will continue to be a huge priority, as I said in my opening statement. Also, a key important is flexibility and understanding of the very varying and wide home circumstances in order to effectively support learning at home. We know there's various circumstances from household to household, and we need to be able to support as best we can. The last term, blended learning school policy was put in place. So each faculty have a plan for blended learning measures. So of course we are prepared in the eventuality of a phased return, which of course does look likely with the latest statement today. So I just want to reassure you on that. We do have measures in place for that. The updated online learning procedures are underpinned, as I mentioned a little minute ago, by robust evidence and data from pupil, parent carer and staff feedback. For the pupil, I mean, these are our most important tool, of course, our pupil voice. 73% of pupils engaged in the pupil survey on the school's return, which is a fantastic number. And the key messages, I mean, overwhelmingly, and of course, you know, obviously we've updated our guidelines on this, overwhelming was unanimous. Pupils are feeling quite overwhelmed by the work. Obviously, the lack of communications with teachers as well came out very strongly. And certainly the second year in particular year group found just too many subjects and feeling overwhelmed with tasks. And indeed, from the survey, only 10% of second years completed all their tasks. So of course we used that to update our current online guidance. But that was a very powerful tool in order to improve learner experiences. We are, as ever, continuing our staff training and use of Teams, so we've appointed faculty reps, and these faculty reps share their good practice at their subject and faculty meetings, and we also offer in-service training during staff collegiate time as well. And our school digital strategy team is really key in supporting our staff training, so that is ongoing. What we've done to support with families, we've updated the home learning guidance from last year, and we've updated it and added to it by a parent teacher who can see, obviously, which we all were parents as well, but see both sides of the coin, how her children also were finding things challenging. So hopefully you found that a useful tool. There's some really good tips within that guidance that was issued last month to you. And I regularly update pupils and also give them tips and checklists in order to help them manage their online learning, because we know it's a very difficult task to organise. So I communicate with pupils regularly through email and also through year teams. So there's lots going on, or lots have gone on, but what are we doing now? Okay, so we're talking about a current online procedure. So as I've mentioned, it's updated now to ensure that pupils follow the timetable, because that also came out very strongly from all the surveys, is a structure to the day and some motivation for pupils to get up in the morning. And of course, the other strong message that came out from the survey was more teacher interactions and communications. So every subject should now be offering a live lesson each week for every year group from S1 to S6. In addition, for S3 and S4, there'll be another one live interaction lesson, and that doesn't necessarily need to be a live lesson. It could be a live interaction. The teacher is available for that period to answer any questions and offer any additional support, and some teachers even have targeted small groups of pupils for that. And with 5th and 6th, they have an additional 2 extra live interactions in addition to their live lesson, which explains the task as you would in the classroom. This current procedure is based on obviously local authority guidance. We have to follow that obviously for the wellbeing of our pupils, I mentioned, which is a priority. And it states that for 1st to 3rd year, you need to be careful, and they should not have more than 15 to 20 hours per week in a screen, so remote learning, which equates to 3 to 4 hours per day, and also S4 to S6, 20 to 25 hours per week. And also in our local authority guidance, which we refer to, there's no expectation that schools replicate the entirety of the school timetable remotely. So we've taken that on board, but with the addition obviously of the pupil feedback from the school's return, which obviously underpinned the online guidance. So what else do we do just now? We're offering targeted support to identified pupils. They do attend school for tutorial lessons with some class teachers and also work with pupil support assistants. And some teachers are offering additional live lessons support identified pupils, and these have been identified from engagement feedback and also from liaising with pupil support leaders. We've introduced an engagement procedure which we shared with you last month, and that was to implement to identify and support pupils who find online learning challenging. And we are sharing those reports with Home for all year groups. 4th to 6th year last term, and 1st to 3rd year you will receive an engagement tracking report this Friday to see how your child is engaging across their subjects. Now we will be looking at that also and reviewing the current practices. In addition to that, there's ongoing communications all the time and support offered to all pupils via email and year group teams. Teachers do email and support pupils via emails. I always say to pupils, and I'm communicating with them, to always ensure that they check their Outlook. I do also, though, understand how overwhelming that can be if you are getting a lot of emails and you're trying to balance your team's notifications as well. So there's a balance there as well. And there's also regular communications by pupil support leaders with certain pupils, and of course key adults are ongoing with their conversations with their classes and also year heads. And finally, what we're doing is, as Donald has mentioned, we've conducted surveys with all pupils and parents. Well, it was about half the pupils actually undertook that survey because obviously they're not in school, so they had to do it in their own time. And obviously Parent Cares, you've just hopefully completed the survey, which closed last weekend. So currently we're just analysing the data for that, which will be shared shortly. But it's been really interesting looking at that data with Aisling Dolan, who's our curricular leader of maths, who's been leading on this. So more information will come out shortly with the key messages and what are we going to do next as a result of this feedback. So that leads us into the last slide. So this is what we're planning next. So of course, I know there's been a little bit of chat about that, so implementing a timetable for some senior pupils to undertake practical work safely in school. Now more information will follow on that, and Mr. Shankland is leading on that, so you mentioned something there. But we need to make sure that they do come to school safely. We're continuing to share good practice with staff and use of Teams. And we also have the staff survey, which is being issued this week to all staff, for staff to share good practice and cascade that down through faculty reps. A key focus at the moment is developing staff skills and focusing on more pupil interactions and lessons and opportunities for group work. Now, this brings it back to what I mentioned about obviously the lack of peer support pupils have and not seeing their friends. We know how useful and how valuable it is discussing with each other and active learning. So we're looking at introducing more breakout room training for teams and giving more opportunities for pupils to interact and to form groups within lessons. I know we can't replicate what would happen in a classroom, but we're doing our best to try and give those opportunities. And we're also collating good practice apps to support with this. The current online learning procedures. So of course, as part of analysing the data from the surveys, we're going to review obviously what's happening currently, and we will make any necessary adjustments. That's so important with moving forward. So how are we going to do that also as part of that process? So tomorrow, actually, myself and Ms. Dolan are going to meet with a focus group of pupils, and we're going to further explore the views of online learning. So from the survey results, we want to just dig a bit deeper and find out a little bit more, which will inform our next steps. And also for parents as well, we'd like to invite a focus group of parents to further explore views on the online learning, and more information will follow on that. But I did notice a question in the Q&A, but why the parental survey was not anonymous this time. It was actually because we wanted to invite parents in to form a focus group to kind of dig a bit deeper on the data from the survey. So we needed to know who those parents were. So that hopefully will answer that question. And finally, of course, we're reviewing the current engagement procedure, which is the engagement tracking reports, and we will make any necessary adjustments to that. So actually meeting with a group of staff this Thursday to review that, to look at the local authority guidelines around it, which has just been issued, and of course adjust looking at contact with home with that. And finally, looking at first and second years, I know I've been emailing and in contact with a few parents. And it's interesting looking at the survey results as well for the first and second year rotation. Obviously, there's a clear rationale about doing that rotation. But we are aware that some pupils are working at a speed and they are getting through the work. So we do need to ensure that they are challenged and given enough work. So we are setting up an additional team for first and second year pupils, which will have work from all their subjects, additional work. We deliberately don't want to do that for all classes because that would put too much pressure on many pupils who we know are still feeling overwhelmed with the work. But then that is an additional resource for pupils to do extra work on certain subjects. So we're lots to do still. I say we're very busy, but I want to assure you we're constantly reviewing and we're constantly adjusting. Nothing's ever written in stone. And of course, with the updates that come out nationally, we will have to adjust and to meet these. So lots more to come. So please do watch out for the focus group of parents to come out and also the key messages and our next steps from the survey results. Okay, many thanks, everyone. And I think it's over to Bob Shankland now. Thank you.
I can't hear you, Bob.
You think I would have learned how to unmute my mic by now. Thanks to Dee for handing over there, and thanks a lot to Sarah and the rest of the Parent Council for inviting me along tonight just to give a brief update on SQA matters. I am just going to pop a little presentation up onto the screen and just talk through this quickly. I think everyone should be able to see that. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll just talk through a few little bits here. I see there's quite a few questions coming up about SQA stuff already in the Q&A. So hopefully some of what I'll cover here, maybe I'll cover those questions, and if not, obviously we'll have a chat about that afterwards. So the latest SQA update came last week on the 16th of February. The most notable parts of this update were that the date for the Provisional Course Awards to be submitted to the SQA. So Provisional Course Awards are the awards that will be given to the students for their courses based on the evidence that they have generated. That originally was set for mid-May, then revised to the end of May, and now we are at the end of June. So 25th of June being the last day of the summer term. The update from the SQA also mentioned that there was a continued focus on the model for certification this year, and the fact that the model is clearly about demonstrated learner evidence. So basically, these provisional course awards are determined by the evidence that candidates produce. And it's worthwhile noting as well that that evidence can really only be produced when we are not in a lockdown situation, because the evidence produced, for example, through assignments at home, the conditions under which that has been produced can't be determined. So it's only really when we are back physically schooling that this kind of evidence can be generated. Again, in the update, there is a clear focus from the SQA on the importance of robust quality assurance processes. So that is through moderation, mostly, of the marking of assessments for students, and making sure that that meets the national standard for these SQA courses. And that moderation would obviously be done within departments, also at a whole school level, also at a local authority level, and the SQA also have a role in moderating through the sampling of evidence, which they still plan to do in the time that they have between now and the 25th of June. And also in the last update, there was the inclusion of a appeals process, which in previous updates they had intimated that they didn't think there was going to be a need for an appeals process, but that seems to be there now. But again, the way some of these updates go, it does say that more details on this will follow after the SQA consult a bit more, I believe, with schools and other stakeholders as to what's absolutely required from an appeals process this year. So that was really what was covered in the most recent update from the SQA. Other things that are going on SQA related at the moment are the fact that we were given the authority to be able to start to bring pupils in from the 22nd of February, which is yesterday, for essential practical activities. So this is for practical courses where there is work that cannot be done remotely, predominantly learning and teaching tasks, not assessments, although the tasks that people may need to do may form a portfolio of evidence that is then used to assess a final grade, but it wouldn't be, for example, to bring people in to necessarily sit them down to give them a test. And a timetable of activities is almost complete, and that will be beginning next week, and you can be expecting some communication on that probably tomorrow or Thursday, but definitely, of course, before the end of the week. I did see one of the questions that popped up in the Q&A asking why Boroughmuir had started their activities this week, but we haven't started ours yet. I mean, in general terms, I think we all have to be very careful with comparing school against school, because we all work within very different contexts, and also that every school varies with regards to the amount of practical subjects that they actually run, and of course where these departments are with their practical activities, of course, is different across the school, and also we have an obligation, and the advice that we were given by Education Scotland for organising these to minimise the amount of young people coming in and the amount of time that staff and young people would be coming in at the moment to do this. Taking all that information and getting all the information from our staff, we felt that for the vast majority, these tasks didn't need to begin until next week. So that's the decision that we've made. The last part, and I know this is a hot topic for everyone really, is around assessment planning, and obviously that's a continuing task about planning for exactly how we are going to assess all our courses from National 5 to Advanced Higher. As I said earlier, a lot of that assessing to generate the evidence that they require to make the provisional course awards can only happen when young people are in school. And so obviously today's announcement from the First Minister really starts to give us hopefully a bit of clarity around when that will be, which means then that the finer detail of assessment planning can then be put in place. Although I should stress that and this was in the SQA update as well, that came on the 16th of February, that when students return initially into school, and you know, the update today did say that it looks like some senior pupils or more senior pupils may be returning from mid-March. Obviously the focus will need to be on consolidating the learning which has been going on over our time of remote learning, first of all, to make sure that that learning is solidified, and then we would be looking to be implementing the assessments that we need to do to generate the evidence that we can make the judgments on the provisional course awards from there. So I would say that it is likely, but I have to stress that obviously the First Minister's announcement was only today and there's a lot of detail to follow about that, but it is likely that assessments will be able to be carried out after return from Easter break, and that they will continue all the way throughout May, and that I would imagine that we would be trying to complete the vast majority of those assessments by the end of May. So then if there's any mopping up required to be done, then that can happen in the early stages of June, which then give us time then to do all the moderation processes that we're required to do to make sure that the awards that are then given to the students based on the evidence that they've generated are in line with national standards. And as I say, there's a whole school aspect to the moderation of the assessments as well, and undoubtedly the local authority will also want to take a role in that. So there's a fair bit of time that needs to be put aside to allow that to happen. Assessments are being encouraged by the SQA for the majority of these to be class-based, so be happening in the classes that the young people are attending in their normal timetables. And there'll be a schedule of that published in the near future. My hope would be that we would be able to publish a schedule of assessments before the Easter break, so that everyone knows exactly what is coming up for their subjects. One caveat to what I was saying there about class-based assessments is that for some subjects there is a requirement for extended bits of assessment. And for some subjects as well, in the guidance that we were given from the SQA, it's deemed desirable that we have an extended assessment. So we may make provision available for that to happen too in certain subject areas. But I would imagine that the vast majority will be within class assessments. And as I say, hope for that detailed schedule to be out, students and parents, before the Easter break. And really, that is all that I have to say for the time being. And obviously, I'm sure there'll be questions in the Q&A which we can cover today. And then I think I am handing back over to Sarah.
Sarah, we can't hear you.
Sorry, there's a lag on my unmute button and I keep unmuting and muting myself. Very professional. I just want to say thank you to everybody for their presentations there on these very important subjects, and for Donald for covering the other issues that he covered. It's time for looking at questions now. I have said earlier that we would finish by about 8 o'clock. Given the time we're at the moment and the range of questions we have, I suspect we'll probably go on for a little bit longer than that, so we can get a kind of a good representative spread of the questions answered just now. The rest will be answered afterwards and posted. Before I pass back to Donald to deal with those, could I just answer one of the questions that was raised in the Q&A, which was about parent council meetings, and asking whether it would be possible in the future for these to continue as online meetings. And I'd just like to say that, yes, the Parent Council is considering this, or at least a mixture of online and in-person meetings. I mean, there are some things that are much easier to do in person, but we have noticed that we get much higher participation. With online meetings, it's easier for teachers and parents and the Parent Council to be involved in it, and particularly on evenings like tonight, I think there are an awful lot more people involved in this than would be if we were in the library. So yes, that's definitely something that we'll be looking at for the future, even once we're back to normal. So could I pass that back over to Donald now? Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for picking that up. I noticed that there are 66 published questions. I'm guided by you, Sarah, in terms of how you would like us to approach this. Will I go for the ones, for example, I'll make my way through the list of ones that have drawn, for example, more than 20 thumbs up, with the reassurance that we'll respond to all of these in a Q&A spreadsheet, which will appear on the Parent Council website in the next week.
Yeah. Well, Donald, I note that a number of the questions relate to SQA issues, a number relate to remote learning issues, and some are miscellaneous issues within the school. So perhaps you would like to start with some of those, and then the members of staff here are representing specific issues could perhaps pick up the ones which seem most salient from there. I don't know if that would work for you.
So I'll go through them, including SQA and online learning, just responding.
Well, I thought maybe you could start with the ones which weren't SQA or online learning, and
Gotcha.
then
Okay.
deal with your subject. Yep. Yes, yeah.
Thank you. I will do, and we're absolutely fine for time. So I'll make my way through them. There are a few questions about holidays and rearranging holiday dates, which seems entirely reasonable to me to look at reconfiguring holiday dates and so on and so forth. That's a decision really that's taken place at council level, not at school level. There are, as people may know, 32 local authorities or councils in Scotland, and each has jurisdiction over its holiday timings. That's one to be raised potentially with councillors. It's not straightforward. I know that from previous experience about reconfiguring or changing these for a whole variety of reasons. It's not straightforward, but nevertheless, it may be something that somebody would want to raise, but I know that it's not straightforward. There a lot of thumbs up for the consolidation week, the query there, that looking at that was not popular with parents or pupils. So we had a consolidation week, which was an opportunity, and really trying to respond to youngsters who perhaps were feeling a bit swamped, and there are some, and how we try and protect them from falling further behind. So as would be our normal practice, we had a consolidation week last week, the first week after the holiday. That's drawn quite a lot of concern from parents, because for many it would appear that it was a week off for the pupils. Deirdre, I don't know if you want to comment specifically on that, the consolidation week, and going forward, what your thinking is.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you, Donald. So actually I have responded to a few parents in the last week about that. So yes, indeed, it was a review week for many of our pupils who were feeling overwhelmed. This came from CLs, from PSLs, from support for learning, that they were just a build-up, a pile-up of work. However, I need to stress that work wasn't stopping for any other pupils. So work, the expectation was that teachers were still delivering live lessons and were still adding assignments and work for pupils who were up to date, which we know that many were up to date with that. So it was business as normal for the rest of the school community. The only difference is that those particular pupils who were set work with their teachers, there was no set deadline for them to hand it in. So this week was a clear week of deadlines for most of the classes. So I just want to clarify that it wasn't a pause in work by any means for all pupils, and apologies if that were the case with some pupils not receiving all work, but the expectation was very clear that it was business as normal for classes, but for those pupils who were finding that work was piling up, and because it's incremental and sequential learning, they couldn't do the next assignment without doing the previous one. It was actually an opportunity for them to complete those assignments, to complete the kind of their progression learning. Others would still carry on as normal, but as I say, with no kind of deadlines to complete and to hand it in for. It was really like extension work and embedding their learning, but certainly not stopping their learning for the last week. So apologies if that seemed to be miscommunicated to parents, but that certainly was not the case.
Thanks, Deirdre. So back to me. I'm going to make my way down the list, and hopefully I capture and I look at the questions that are coming up. There are 2-3 questions about the rotational timetable and online learning, so I propose not to respond further to these just now, but we will pick these up following the online survey and also following tonight. I'm not going to home in too much on that. Can S5 pupils really select advanced higher subjects for next year, given that they have neither sat National 5 exams nor higher exams? The answer to that is an emphatic yes. I want to give the line that course choices should be based as they would previously. Choose the courses that are of interest, that are needed to maximise chances of getting into university, and then easing the transition as fully as possible. So I think that choose on the basis that they would in any other year. That's simplistic, but that would be the underpinning principle for me. So yes, it's a full choice of courses. I'm determined that we do that. What measures will be put in place to support S5 pupils who have had 2 sets of exams cancelled going into S6? And that's something that obviously we're going to be considering in some detail over the coming weeks and months. And my colleague, Laura Stewart, has set up a group with pupils, and I've no doubt that that's one of the issues that will arise. It's linked to mental health, for example. It's getting the balance right so that we don't push people over the edge. We also propose to meet again with all of the current S5 in 2 or 3 weeks' time, where we'll capture and look at some of these issues. There'll be a range of people. We have school counsellors now appointed to the school that will work with us as well. So it is uppermost in our minds about how we're going to be addressing the support for all pupils as they come back into school. Question in relation to S4's preparing for exams and assessments, whatever we call them. And later on this term, Bob Shanklin will put something out in terms of just guidelines, details in terms of what should be looked at and directing people as appropriate towards various resources. And clearly curriculum leaders will have an input towards that as well. Bob's role will be to put out a kind of a structure to that, with more detail coming through curriculum leaders and classroom teachers in terms of the specifics about what revision areas, what areas to look at. I can well imagine that will be an area of anxiety for parents and pupils. There's a similar question about S4 pupils. Can they be expected to select hires without any marks or parent consultation having taken place? The answer to that is yes. They may be not as well informed as in other years. And it's something we talked about in some detail with our senior team in terms of the timing of reports, parents' nights, course choices, and so on and so forth. And we arrived at the conclusion that we do need the information in about course choices sooner, so we're sticking to original deadlines. I know my colleague Jeff Wharton has put information out, but I want to reassure people that, you know, after assessments, assignments take place over the coming months, if people wish to make changes, that happens each year, there will be scope to change the choice of courses that people make. And it's something that we do have that facility built in, but this year, perhaps more than most, there may be a bit of incentive to make the planning that we need to put in place for a timetable, really the middle of June. We need the information early. I know that's not ideal for parents and pupils to be fully informed about what's in the courses, but there is going to be a bit more flexibility in terms of making a subsequent change. Someone feels that, well, on balance, I want to choose to doing another hire or another advanced hire slightly later in the year. A question about flexible digital learning, will it continue once DARAH is ready? And this is in relation to my colleague Lorna French, what she said about a 2050 vision for the council. My response to that would be that it wouldn't be the default, it wouldn't be by design, but there may be aspects of our experience in the coming year that may actually be quite beneficial. So I wouldn't want to dismiss new ways of learning and teaching that we develop next year to say we'll not go back to these again. But hopefully we have a bit of time to reflect, and we're not reacting in the middle of a pandemic or a crisis as we're doing. We'll have more time to reflect and to make really better informed decisions and to take everybody with us. That we've not been able to do as well this year. So maybe is the answer, but we'd only be taking it forward if we felt it was an improvement on what we're currently doing. But the plan is very much that we're going to have the accommodation that we need, so FDL is not going to be a necessary provision in future years. It may be something that we wish to employ. A question for Edinburgh City Council, having looked at alternative accommodation for S5 children. And this question will be addressed by my colleague Crawford McGee, who is the Estates Manager for the Council, and he will come back and share with parents what additional work has been done in that regard. And I hope to give a bit more information on that. I know certainly early on we looked at various suggestions, be it the Gillis College or other local accommodation that might have been used. Questions about assessment in S5, Bob talked about that, so forgive me if I don't open that up at the moment. Again, further questions about SQA, I'm going to move on. Question then about local development contributions for new housing as earmarked to expand capacity at James Gillespies High School. There are a few questions then about prediction of roles and rising roles. And one thing I do know after many years in education is that predicting roles, you'd think it would be fairly straightforward and easy, but it isn't. You can reasonably predict there being no other changes. If you know what your P1 role is, we would reasonably transfer into S1 7 years later. In the context of Gillespies, for example, quite a number of our properties until around 5 years ago where there was no requirement for them to, or rather the criteria for HMO licensing was not what it is now. And following those changes in licensing, I do know from friends who are in the business that quite a number of properties sold from being let to students, etc., and they moved into families, sold to families moving in. So that's one reason why we have more children in the catchment area than we had formerly. Looking to the future, the Astley Ainsley Hospital and other building in our area will probably impact on roles, as do the attractiveness of the school, perhaps with a new school build and the school being seen to be successful. Perhaps that also has impacted. And just there are more secondary school age children around than there were. People moving, net migration is higher. So I would like to think that predicting roles would be more accurate than it is. But I'm not going to be critical of my council colleagues. I know that it's difficult. I've worked in different councils and it is difficult to do. And we're quite far out at the moment in terms of where we're at. So we must try and do it better. Question about bringing back textbooks to school at the end of the academic years not for writing in, but as a base and support and going back to using that more. Deirdre, I wonder if I could put you on the spot and just thoughts about textbooks and the use of digital learning. This is something we've talked about quite a bit with various teachers. I'm thinking modern studies staff in particular. Just a few initial thoughts, Dee, about whether there are textbooks and whether or not a return to textbook is something that is possible. Thoughts on that one, Dee?
Yep, actually I collated from all curricular leaders all the resources and textbooks that they currently use. And we have collated that and published it on the school website. It's under curricular resources, and I know that many of them have also had to develop their own resources this year because we weren't allowed to choose textbooks. But I also know that many of them will be returning to textbooks after obviously the situation is over. So I just want to reassure parents that from liaising with CLs and collating all the textbooks and the resources that they use on all the levels and all the subjects, that yes, there will be a return to textbooks, I would imagine, for most subjects, but also you can find as parents, because this is a result of previous parent council meetings where parents were asking for a list of textbooks for each subject and each level. These have now been published on the school website under curricular resources, so you can find these there as well to support your child. But the answer is that yes.
Thanks, Dee. There's a question on catchment pupils. I'm aware that the Gaelic medium are considered to be in catchment. How many of the 324 intake fall into this category, and are the numbers of catchment children from this route increasing? So yes, GME pupils are considered catchment pupils, and they have been for around 30 years, since GME started at Tollcross Primary School as a unit in the early 80s. 7 years later, transferring into James Gillespies High School. So we are the secondary school for GME and have been for 30 years. The popularity and the growth of GME is what led to the development of a new secondary Gaelic school, which current council planning is that this school will open in 2025. That will go some way to easing the capacity issues at Gillespies, but it will not solve the issue entirely. The numbers go beyond what the GME pupils provide in terms of numbers. The GME numbers will rise to around 90 in a few years' time. So for 28 of the last 30 years, the numbers have tended to be no higher than 20. It's really only in the last 2 or 3 years the number has started to grow. And that coincides with the move of a special Gaelic and a standalone Gaelic primary school at the former Bonington School, Tuvnapatka, as it's called. So the numbers are continuing to grow. So it's a great success story for GME, one that adds to the capacity issues that we have at James Gillespies High School currently, and one that the council is actively seeking to resolve, and I'm confident that they will. A question I'm going to move on to where pupils have not managed to cover topics prior to assessments. It would be useful for parents to know which parts of the curriculum will and will not be tested. So I just wonder, Bob, if I can bring you in terms of what information we are going to be able to share with parents, pupils, in terms of what's going to appear in assessments and the timing of this. I know you've touched on it already, but just any further thoughts on that?
Yeah, not the questions, unfortunately. We won't be able to share that. But where there's modifications that have been made to courses this year, which I think really is what the question might be alluding to there. That information has been is published on the SQA website. So every course. And every subject has its own dedicated page on the SQA website. For the SQA document that I have on the school website, there's links to those pages, and on each subject page there is a drop-down menu that says specifically about revisions for 2020-2021, and that will give you a document which will detail anything which has been taken out of the course for this year, to make it possible for obviously the course to be completed, and to make assessment of the course possible, given the lack of time that we've had in school. So that would be the best place to look. But I would also again encourage young people to speak to their teachers about these changes and the kind of things that they will be focusing on. You know, obviously the teachers are very, very experienced in getting students ready for assessments. So a chat like that, bringing a question like that up in a live lesson, or as you know, a kind of chat on Teams would be a really good thing to do, because they will be and are very skilled at directing students as to the best places to go to get exam ready.
Thanks, Bob. I'm grateful to the parents who gave a thumbs up to the comment about that many of us have been concerned about things that have been going over the year, but noted that Charles had a hugely improved experience during this lockdown as compared with the previous one. There is no doubt that we've improved from the first lockdown. That was really tough. We're thrust into that at short notice. The second lockdown has been better. I really hope there is no third or fourth lockdown. If there was a third or fourth, we would get even better. But I really hope that there aren't subsequent lockdowns. That having been said, the skills development, the knowledge that we've developed through this, I think will impact positively on what we're doing in the future in a classroom context as well. I suspect that snow days, as they were in the past, to take one example, may not happen again. In days in the future where schools would be closed on account of snow or indeed other adverse weather, probably will revert to a lockdown type experience where it will be online learning. That might be one benefit or not of the skills that we've developed. Personally, I think if there was a snow day and people could get out in the next year or following and build snowmen for a day, it would be wonderful to have that. But more of that in the future. Got a few comments in relation to a few people's experiencing that they haven't quite had enough work, and that is something that we'll take on board. And I know in the survey that we carried out, and Deirdre will talk further about that, when we analysed that, for example, the rota that we've been using, that's resulted perhaps in some there being an imbalance of work. It's something that we will address and we'll take on board and come back to. I'd also seen some of the comments that there have been classes which have clashed, that teachers are not keeping to their timetable times. I'm just seeing on my screen Ms. O'Brien shaking her head. That shouldn't have happened. That shouldn't have happened, so sincere apologies for that. Do you want to come in at that point, or am I mistaken in my view? Do you come in at that point?
Okay, thanks, Donald. I think I've worked out what's happened there, and hopefully I've resolved that. So I'm feeling that from speaking to some staff and from pupils' feedback is that on a Wednesday our school day structure is slightly different because we have an extra 20 minutes key adult, and it displaces the periods 2 onwards. So the clash seems to have been, as far as I'm aware, that some classes have started while others were finishing because some teachers were sticking to the Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday timetable. So I have put an email out to all staff just to remind them to be wary, because obviously we're not in school, so it's quite tricky possibly to remember that Wednesday's got different times, and possibly some pupils as well may forget that a Wednesday, I know my first year class I put in as 12:05 on a Wednesday, but my Monday class is 12 o'clock when I teach them for period 4. So it's just, I suppose, reminding staff and pupils that a Wednesday timings are different, so there may be clashes. I'm certainly not aware of any doubling because teachers are following their timetable as well, as far as I'm aware. But if there are any instances of that, of actually double for the whole period, could you please do let me know? So do let me know via the JAM admin address, and I would investigate that further for you. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Deirdre. There's a question which I'm going to just make a comment about, and it's in relation to the rationale for the rotation of subjects in S1, S2, and why we have that rota. And I share with you just interestingly that I was met earlier today with the head teacher at Boroughmuir, and he was asking us about our rota. They hadn't done a rota up till now, but they're now moving towards a rota because they're finding that the S1s and S2s are overwhelmed with 16 subjects, so they're having to move to a rota. So we moved to a rota in response to feedback last time round, and that may lead to some youngsters having an imbalance from one week to another. But Deirdre, do you want to say something about our rationale beyond what I've said there? Because I know there was a clear rationale for moving, but unwittingly we have some youngsters and parents who are less happy with what we've ended up with, perhaps.
Yep, absolutely. And I can also speak as a parent of a S1 pupil myself, actually. So the rationale, and I know somebody put that in the Q&A, the rationale really is based on 2 key elements, and it is the pupil feedback. The pupil voice is a powerful tool. And as I said earlier on, only 10% of current second years when they're in first year managed to complete all their work. In fact, we had 40% that completed less than 50% of their tasks. And when I dug a bit deeper into that and asked reasons why, over 80% of them said they could not manage 16 tasks per week on Teams with all the notifications and all the communications, because they were stuck not getting the help immediately, and they were emailing the teachers, possibly not getting a response to the teachers, obviously putting work on another class as well. So we're getting all bogged down. So that was a really clear decision we made there. And in fact, when I spoke to some of the second years, when we did move to rotation for the last few weeks of term last summer, they said actually it made such a big difference to their workload and to their mental well-being. So that was a decision to retain it. But also bearing in mind, we are guided very much by local authority guidelines, and it does state that no more than 3 to 4 hours a day should be done by first and second years. I mean, my son in first year has 6 hours a day, and he's finding it really, really hard because his room is his classroom, and I can see the impact it's having on him. So I think it's a sensible move to a 3 to 4 hour days remote learning, because kids need to get out and about and get some exercise, and there's lots of other enrichment activities they can do. But I'm also aware, as I said earlier, to the needs of all learners. And for those, because pupils work at different paces, we understand that. But for those who are finishing the work, we are going to set up this additional work or resources team for first and second years, so they can do additional maths or English or languages work as well. Because I said, because the pace of children, they learn at different speeds. So yes, so that was the rationale that underpinned our decision, certainly majorly from the pupils' own voice, saying to us that they were not coping very well. But we also take on board the fact that some pupils are coping extremely well with the reduced timetable, and we want to be able to meet their needs as well and supply them additional work on this team, this new team, which we hopefully set up by the end of this week. Okay, thanks, Donald.
Thanks, Deirdre. I would just supplement what Deirdre said there, that broadly speaking, the pupils will fall into 3 categories. There is the group for whom the amount of work is just about right. There is the group of pupils for whom they are feeling overwhelmed for a variety of reasons. And there is the group of pupils who are getting through everything in record fast time and then there's too much for them, basically. So we're responding to all of that by looking at, as Deirdre mentioned earlier, in terms of differentiation and various materials. Now I'm getting people waving at me. Can I just check? Deirdre, do you want to come in?
Yeah, can I just come in, because I think it's really important that parents have a bit more of a bigger picture here. So I know we're not sharing at the moment widely the results of the pupil survey and the parent survey, but from the pupil survey we did ask a question about their learning experience and the rotation, their workload, how the rotation first and second year relates to the workload. And in actual fact, for the pupils, they said enough work, they felt there was enough work with the timetable as it is decided. 69% of pupils have reported there's enough work for them, and 22% still say it's too much work, and only 9% say it's not enough work. So that's 91% of our first and second year pupils who fed back are saying there's just enough work for them, or even there's too much work. So obviously we do have to take that on board as well when we're adjusting and making reviews. But certainly the pupil body, the pupil voice is stating that they feel there is enough work for them. And for those, the 9% they don't feel there's enough work, we do have this additional team that's going to be set up for them. Thanks.
Thank you. There is people will have noticed a proliferation of TLAs, or 3-letter acronyms in education. SQA, EIS. Lateral flow testing is a recent addition to our lexicon. There's a question about lateral flow testing. So lateral flow testing has begun for senior pupils and staff. And the means by which that is organised is as follows. A consent form is completed, it's returned by pupils or staff, and on arrival, their first appearance at the school, they collect a test kit, and there are instructions then on how that's administered. It is only applicable to those staff or pupils who are going to be coming into school. There's correspondence that went out on that, but I can reassure you it has started, and it will provide some reassurance for people, but also data for government in terms of the epidemiology of looking at data and trying to predict and work out how best to do the phasing of returns. So it serves more than one purpose, I understand. I'm scanning through and conscious of time, so I'll pick up 1 or 2 others if that's okay. Easter work that youngsters will be doing over Easter. Bob Shanklin mentioned earlier, we'll aim to get a schedule of what assignments, assessments, whatever we want to call them, post-Easter. We'll get that out. Bob, did you want to come in at that point?
Yeah, no, I can. Yeah, just to say that obviously we'll be very busy with assessments after Easter. That's absolutely unavoidable. The model for certification that the SQ have set out means that we have to have hard evidence, and the guidance that the SQA have given, they've said that the best way to gather evidence that has strong predictive value of how students would do in these courses is through assessments. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of assessments following Easter, and I know some people have been writing some questions around what would be the best things to be doing over Easter, and will guidance be given about that? I would imagine that in classes that will be covered. I'd be very surprised if it wasn't. And obviously, normal kind of revision that you'd be doing for assessments, looking at past papers, things like that, is massively valuable. You know, shouldn't be waiting I would say, for permission to start revising for assessments. That should be stuff that's ongoing and happening as often as they can. And Easter, I would imagine, would be a key time for looking over these kind of things and trying to get his assessment ready as they possibly can be.
Thanks, Bob. 3 or 4 questions here I'll bundle into one, if I may. And it's the plans, if you like, for years 4, 5 and 6 in the next 2 or 3 months. And questions around when they will be coming in, is it blended learning and so on and so forth. My interpretation of the message from the First Minister today was that we would get more detail next week, as I mentioned earlier in my general remarks. So as soon as we are able to process and understand that, we will share with you which pupils will come in and when. And as Bob has just mentioned, there is likely to be a considerable amount of assessment-related activity post-Easter, and we will get as much detail as we can to you as parents and pupils as soon as possible. I have no doubt that there's lots of other questions perhaps that I ought to have I've caught my eye, but I haven't. But I will guarantee that we will respond to all of these post-meeting and relay them to Parent Council, so they go onto the Parent Council website. Sarah, if there's anything else that you'd like us to cover in particular, I'm happy to do that, but otherwise at this stage, back to you.
No, I think we've covered a good range of questions, unless there are specific things either Deirdre or Bob have picked up on that they think they definitely need to respond to tonight. And if that's not the case, then, as you say, we'll catch up with them in due course once everybody's had a time to think about what's happening. So if we're all happy with that, yes, it's now 8:15 and it's probably a good time to finish. So I would like to thank everybody for joining us this evening. Thank you particularly to Deirdre, Bob and Donald for their updates and for answering our questions. As always, we are very glad to hear from the school about what is happening in these important areas which we know are of concern for so many pupils and parents. This has been an extraordinary period of disruption, and having the opportunity to hear directly from the school is really very important. Our next Parent Council meeting will take place at the end of March, and we will announce that date later this week, and we hope you can join us then. And in the meantime, thank you and good night.